Hi, welcome back to the channel and welcome to today's video. We're here in the craft room again. Today's video is about the May Hat Challenge. What is that, you say? Well, every year I try to, around the month of May, do a challenge that involves hats because hats are quick to make. They're a fairly fast project and a fun one because you can experiment with patterns and colour and shapes and it doesn't take you forever. So what I did for this year's hat challenge is I decided to do a every hat in the book challenge. What does that mean? Well, I got this book. I'm not going to try and say the lady's name, but there is 20 hats in this book. And I decided to make all of them. But there's another caveat on that. I could not buy any yarn for it. It had to be made with yarn that is in the stash. So that was quite a challenge to find the right yarn and get it to the right gauge to make something that looks similar to the hat in the book. And you will see there were some hits and some definite misses. But before I get to that, if you're new here, I try to, on this channel, to create videos that explain and show different techniques and aspects to crocheting and fibre arts. It's mainly crochet at the moment, but we are working towards adding more different things. So if you like that, please subscribe and you'll get notified when a new video comes out. And if you can like and share the video, it brings it higher in the algorithm so other people can see it. And hopefully we can help more people. So that being said, how about we go on with showing you the hats. First up, we have a hat called Cool Classic. And you'll see it on the screen right now and before every hat what the hat was supposed to look like in the book. This is the photo that comes with the pattern, and now here is my one on Thread the Head. And I made this hat with the Ogo yarn. I'll just put that there so you can see which one I mean, and a 6mm hook. The pattern itself was fine. Unfortunately, I started with a light colour and then the rest was dark, so it looks like somebody dropped paint on it or something. Anyhow, size-wise and pattern-wise, that was a great pattern. Next up, we have a hat called Sailor Girl, and now we have Fred modelling the hat I did. Now, I did this one with an Annette Erickson jeans yarn. I don't know that I have the wrapper anymore. It was from Spotlight. I have all my wrappers next to me. No, I don't have the wrapper for that one anymore. And I used a 5mm hook. You did have to watch when you got to the band that it didn't get too tight, but the hat itself and the pattern was quite good. Yeah, I really like the way this one turned out. Next up, we have one called Baker Boy. And you should see it on the screen right now while I struggle to get it on Thread the Head. Alright, and here is Thread the Head wearing the Baker Boy hat. Now this one, I didn't have the super chunky yarn that they said. They said you needed a Rowan yarn, and I can't get Rowan yarn. So I used 3 strands of 8-ply yarn just from the stash. They weren't labelled, so I can't tell you what ones they were, and a 10mm hook. It is a very dense hat. It does have the right shape, but anyway, it was interesting to make. I don't know of anybody that would wear that. Up next, we have a hat called All That Glitters. It should be coming on the screen now. And here he is wearing it. Now, with this one, I used a yarn called, if I can find it, here it is. It's called Date Night. And I also used a plain 8 ply for the body of the hat. Date Night's the one that's sparkling, and it was a 5mm and 6mm hook. Not a bad hat. It's like a suspended granny stitch hat. Quite a good pattern, that one. Up next we have this one. Okay, this one's called Fiber Fun. Now this one was a bit of a journey. And here's Fred the Head wearing mine. This is the funniest looking one. I had never used furry yarn with crochet before. I used a yarn called Otis Fiber. That was from Spotlight. And I of course can't find the wrapper. There it is. This one. Oh, hold it up so you can see it. So that's what the fur yarn is. What happened, I made the hat, which it stopped here on this line, and honestly it looked like I had a blue afro. So, and I had fur yarn left, so I made it into a Ushanka hat where the ties at the top, up here, they can come undone and tie under the chin and give you warm ears. So that's Fiber Fun. And up next we have one called Pretty in Pink. And this is my first go of crocheting with mohair. Alright, so this one here is Nellie Noggin wearing Pretty in Pink. Now with this yarn I used one called FOMO from Spotlight. This is a acrylic mohair. It's polyester and acrylic, but it acts like mohair. And this was less than one ball of it. Quite a good pattern, but it came out very small. And I used the 6mm hook as well, so I don't know what happened with that one. Up next we have one called Hippy Chick. So move Nellie. And there's Fred. Oh, his ears popped out. There we go. And now for this one, I used a yarn. Now this is from Hobby, which is a Swedish yarn company. My words. And this was the yarn I used, Bumbo Moonlight. Hopefully you can read that. Yep. And what I did is that I used 2 strands at once, and I matched the colorway so they changed at the same time. And I used a 3mm crochet hook. And I really like how this one turned out. So that one is called Hippy Chick. Up next we have one called Dreamweave. Here is Fred wearing Dreamweave. Now this was a mill end. I can show you what the ball of yarn looked like. That's it there. I have no idea what the yarn's called, but it was a mill end from Spotlight, so yay mill ends. And it used a 12mm hook, and you wouldn't think that on how tight it is, but it did. It's like a moss stitch for the hat, so definitely doesn't look like the picture in the book, but I did follow it. Up next we have one called Lady Grey. And here is Fred the Head wearing Lady Grey. Now with this one, I used one of my treasured yarns called, I'm not even going to say that because I'm probably going to wreck that. That's the yarn I used. And this was the colorway. I have a little bit left. This was a very short run yarn at Spotlight. It came in, everybody grabbed it, and then they never bought it back again. I used a 4mm and 5mm crochet hook to make it, and yeah, it went together really well. It could have been the wonderful yarn I used, but it was a good pattern to use. And up next is one called Colour Clash. So here is Colour Clash. Now with this I used 8 ply yarns, 2 of each colour held together as I worked up to get the thickness. And every row had 4 ends. I was very tempted to leave it as a mohawk and not work them in, but I did work them all in. I just love the colour. This is actually the one that's on the cover of the book, and all the yarns were just standard acrylics, and it was a 7mm hook for that one. Up next we have one called Starry Starry Night, and here is Fred wearing Starry Starry Night. This is the first hat I've come across where you had to do an elastic headband and then crochet over it. I'd never done that before. This is the Catherine wheel pattern, and I used 2 lots of 8-ply for each colour, dark green and a light green, and 2 blacks, and that worked out well. I didn't do as many repeats on that because it was looking like a saggy ball sack, so I didn't want to do it anymore. So that's that hat, quite interesting. Next one's one called Flirty Flowers, and there's Fred wearing flirty flowers with a flower in the wrong place, but who cares. Right, once again, this was the Ogo yarn. Put that here, Ogo yarn. Yeah, I think the yarn is actually too thick for it, but it was the right thickness according to the pattern. That's with a 6mm and a 7mm crochet hook. I didn't do the 3 flowers, I just did the 1. Yeah, I don't really like this pattern, but it worked. Next one's one called Colour Fun. This is Fred wearing his hat, and this was a mill end yarn. I can't tell you what it is because it was a mill end and I used all of it, but the first time I made this pattern, this is how it turned out. Very small. It doesn't even fit on Nellie. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I made it exactly how the pattern said, and yeah, I don't know. So I added extra stitches and I upped the crochet hook size to 6.5. It was originally 4.5, and it fits Fred now, but the original one was just half the size. So yeah, don't know what happened with that one. Next one up's one called Light and Lacy, and it came up quite good. The colour changes were quite nice. It's got a very faint sparkle. You'll have to look up Lang, L-A-N-G sock yarns. As I said, I didn't have a label for that one, but I used a 4mm hook, and yeah, that one worked out fine. Next one we have is one called Making Waves. Okay. And here is Fred wearing Ripple Stitch, and the yarn that I used for this one is called Coffee Shop by Premier Yarns. It's quite a nice soft yarn, but in the making of this I found out I'm allergic to wool, so it's got wool in it. I used a 6mm hook to make this, but I did change the ribbing here. It just had 2 rounds of single crochet. I think it needed a bit wider band, so I did change that one. But the pattern itself wasn't bad. Next one we have one called Filet Fun. And here's Fred the Head wearing Filet Fun. And this once again was the Coffee Shop yarn again. It's not really a blokey one with the flower on, is it? Oh well, doesn't matter. And nothing wrong with that pattern. Worked fine with a 4mm and 5mm crochet hooked. Alright, next one is one called Shades of Grey. Now this was another one that looked like an empty bag, so we took some of the rows off it. This to me is Fred wearing it. Looks like a fisherman's hat. And if you can see the V's on there, you're wrapping them around the stitches. It's like a V stitch overlapping itself. Quite an unusual one. And this was done with Spot Saver Grey, which is a 10-ply standard acrylic here, and more of the Ogo yarn. That would be the green, the black and the green is the Ogo, and the grey is all the way through as the Spot Saver. And we didn't do them as many repeats as the pattern said. Next one up's called Winter Wonder. I decided to make this one in velvet, and here is Fred wearing it. Now this one has all bobbles on it, and I did the first row and I didn't like them in lines, so I staggered every second row. So they were all little ridges of bobbles. Quite a nice pattern, and 6mm hook. Not bad. Next one is called Chic Black and White. Is Fred wearing Chic Black and White. Now this is the millstone pattern, and I used 8-ply black and I used this mill end, and I think they look really effective together. Once again, it's a mill end. I don't know what the yarn's called, I apologize, but they don't tell you when you buy a mill end. I also did less rounds because I wanted it more form-fitting, and we used a 4.5mm hook. I think we're at the last one. The next one's called Street Smart. And here is Mr. Fred wearing Street Smart. And once again, this is the same mill end as the last one. And so that was the last hat in the book. But what I also did is I had a lot of the Ogo yarn left, so I used the pattern. I'm going to put a link in the description that comes on the Ogo wrapper. You can go online and get it from Yarn Inspirations, and I made some hats with the leftovers, and I'll show you them on Fred in just a second. Right, so that's Fred wearing one of the hats. This one is another one, but this one here is quite a bit smaller, is following the pattern exactly, and I felt it was too small a hat, so I added another repeat of the colour. And that is all the hats I made. So I hope you enjoyed seeing all these hats and the different ways that they came out. Please like, share and subscribe, and let me know if you do another hat challenge this year, because this one took a while. There's a few of them, and I'll see you on the next video.